Denis Villneuve, thank you for saving 2024. I don't know how much more Madam Web, Drive Away Dolls, and Tyler Perry movies I could take. Here are my immediate thoughts on Dune Part 2. Dune Part 2 is the second installment from Canadian director Denis Villneuve and his take on the acclaimed sci-fi novel from Frank Herbert. Taking place immediately following Dune Part 1, Paul Atreides, played by Timothée Chalamet, unites with Chani, played by Zendaya, and the Fremen, while seeking revenge against the conspirators who destroyed his family in Part 1. Facing a choice between the love of his life and the fate of the universe, Paul must prevent a terrible future only he can foresee. First off, just so there is some context, yes, I have read the original Frank Herbert novel. When I was in high school, I was in full complete nerd mode, reading Dune, Lord of the Rings, anything Stephen King, so I do have an affinity for the story. I have a nostalgic feeling for the 1984 David Lynch film. It isn't perfect, but it is weird enough just to be entertaining. And Jodorowsky's Dune is one of my all-time favorite documentaries. So I really love the property, and I have a good understanding, I feel, of Frank Herbert's novel and the universe and the mechanics. So I apologize in advance if this is going to be a little bit of a longer review than normal, but I really love this story. So let's just get into reviewing this bad boy. Timothée Chalamet plays Paul Atreides as the reluctant hero pretty well. When the film focuses on the love story between him and Zendaya, I think he puts in a pretty admirable performance, and I did like his interaction with the Fremen, specifically Javier Bardem. Now, it's when he gets into leader mode, that's when things get a little bit more hard to swallow. One of my friends has this issue with Leonardo DiCaprio, and every time he sees him in a movie, no matter how old he is, he always sees him as the kid from Titanic. Now, I don't have that exact same issue with Chalamet, but there are times when he needs to give off a more intimidating vibe, and it really doesn't come off as that successful. But for the most part, though, I do believe that he gives a really great performance. Zendaya as Chani, the soldier and individualist from the Fremen, gives a really great performance. She does a really great job of showing her range as someone that truly does love and care for Paul Atreides, but at the same time, she is a fierce fighter and a staunch individualist, like I said. She is the one that actually gives the most pushback against this whole prophecy that Paul is this messiah for the Fremen. And I believed everything that she said and did in this movie. Her performance in terms of her body language and her facial reactions and even how she acts through her eyes is really great. And I believe she was the heart and soul of this movie. Rebecca Ferguson is really good as Lady Jessica, Paul Atreides' mother, and she carries a secret that only her and Paul know about. And her transformation, seeing how she was from Dune Part 1 up until where she is in Dune Part 2 at the end, everything that has to do with the Bene Gesserit is really great. And Josh Brolin also returns as Gurney, and I really enjoyed his performance as well. The interactions that he has with Timothée Chalamet is great as well. Javier Bardem gave my favorite performance as Stilgar, the true believer of the Fremen, the one that thinks that Paul Atreides is the messiah of the Fremen. He's one of those guys that'll see Paul do something that he would interpret as Paul being the messiah. He'll see it as a sign, and when Paul denies it, he will be like, man, he is so humble. He must be the messiah. And people go out and they agree with him. There was a lot of comedic levity that Javier Bardem brought to the film that I really did appreciate. It was really a great performance. Austin Butler as Faid Rutha is one of the newcomers for Dune Part 2, and he's essentially a psychopath. Now, Anyone that has seen the original 1984 film may compare his performance with that of Sting's. Now, I feel that Austin Butler's performance here is a little different. It's a different animal. He plays him, he is a psychopath, but there is a little bit more of a calculating level to him. We get to see his mind at work when it comes to war, strategy, and when it comes to politics as well. Butler is also part of probably the most visually striking sequence in the entire movie, and it's that gladiator battle sequence that's shot in black and white. It looks absolutely tremendous, and I saw this in IMAX and I was blown away. It is one of the most inspired pieces of filmmaking I have seen all year. Some of the other characters, and while I like the actors themselves, I felt the characters themselves were a little lacking. It was pretty much all on the villain side. Stellan Skarsgård and Dave Bautista really were just played to the background as one-dimensional villains that just barked orders and screamed a lot. Christopher Walken is really more of a presence to kind of set up things in the future and really didn't have a whole lot to do. Florence Pugh was in this, and I love seeing her in anything, but even I admit she really didn't have a whole lot to do in the film either. So in terms of some secondary characters, I wish the film would expand on those a little bit more. And that's the thing about Dune Part 2. The world that Denis Villneuve creates is so vast that sometimes it feels like it sacrifices character development for spectacle. And there isn't anything wrong with that. It's just, we have to remember that Dune in itself isn't that much of a contemplative sci-fi movie as much as it is a war sci-fi film. The special effects in this movie is amazing. The technology that is used in Dune Part 2 is one of the best things I feel that the filmmakers really got right. The Fremen still suits look practical and functional. We get to see the full-scale destruction of atomics, which are basically nuclear bombs. We see the different ornithopters that are flying around in the film, the thumpers that are used to attract worms in Arrakis. All that stuff is great. And this film didn't feel fake to me. There were no scenes that looked fake. All the scenes that were shot in Arrakis looked like they were shot on location, and that brought a sense of authenticity to the film. And at the same time, there's this great contrast of the wavy lines in the sand where the Fremen call their home against the hard lines and metal of the Harkonnens. What really surprised me about Dune Part 2, there are actual moments of comedy. Like I said earlier, Javier Bardem at times plays a little bit of the comic relief, but it is actually more situational, so it feels a lot more natural. The Freeman community is brilliantly brought to life in this film. We get really immersed in their ways. We see how they survive in the desert, how they stay hydrated. We hear their language a lot, which I really did appreciate. And the whole sequence with Paul riding a worm for the first time, man, that was breathtaking, exhilarating, and exciting. And it gave me a real sense of the culture of the Fremen. We get a real feel of the environment. I'm a Star Wars nerd, so anytime I see a planet covered in sand, I'm like, oh no, here we go again. It's Tatooine. But Denis Villneuve and his filmmaking team did their absolute best to make Arrakis feel like a fully formed character of its own, and it really feels like an alien world. And it is really difficult to make an alien world feel truly alien, and I feel Denis Villneuve and his team really succeeded in that. And honestly, I shouldn't have doubted him. This is the same guy who brought us Blade Runner 2049, which is one of the greatest sequels ever made. The score by Hans Zimmer is truly out of this world. It has an epic feel to it, but at the same time, it has this ambient quality that feels like that there are instruments used that are ripped from other universes. At the same time, this movie is loud, and the sound design for this movie is awesome. I'm sitting in my seat and I could hear every blade, I could feel every explosion, and it felt like I was sitting in the seat of every vehicle. The sound design was tremendous. Great attention to detail for that. And I can really say that for a lot of Dune Part 2. The production design, the set design, the costume design, all of that stuff is top shelf, and I really expect the Academy Awards to recognize this movie a lot next year. Okay, there is one more thing that I would like to say, and it's not a spoiler, it's more of a friendly warning to devout fans of Frank Herbert's novel and know the lore of Dune inside and out. Film adaptations are just that, adaptations, and studios reserve the right to make certain changes to a property if they feel it will make it more digestible to mainstream audiences, or sometimes they may combine elements of a property to condense the runtime of the film. Every property, whether it's a comic book, video game, television show, anything like that, experiences this. So again, this is just a friendly warning to any devout fans of Frank Herbert's Dune. Overall, Dune Part 2, I believe, is actually better than Dune Part 1. We are more invested into the world of Arrakis and the Fremen, and the love story between Paul and Chani, I feel, helps to elevate the film past being just a sci-fi nerd's wet dream. But it is still a sci-fi nerd's wet dream, with striking visuals, an amazing score, great performances from our leads as well. I do wish the villains were fleshed out a little bit more in the film, but honestly, that is a minor nitpick. I am just absolutely invested in the story, and I am all in on a Dune universe. A Duneverse? Did I just coin a new phrase? This is a prestige movie for me. As of right now, Dune Part 2 is my favorite film of 2024, and it isn't even close. Denis Villneuve and his team are miracle workers, and I will not be shocked to see this movie nominated for a ton of Oscars next year. See this in IMAX and see this now. I will be watching this movie again and again and again and again. Bring on Dune Part 3. What did you think of Dune Part 2? Share your thoughts, leave your comments, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to hit that bell icon so you can get notifications as well. Thanks a lot, everyone. Take care.